Appreciate that.
Okay, really quickly, I'm going to go through some of the gaps, and I think these are the things that we can really learn from in order to move forward, have that forward motion that this field so desperately needs. We have major gaps when it comes to terminology and case definition, from things as simple as how do we actually define fatigue to how we use the words diagnostic and screening tests. You know, there was a lot throughout the past 2 days, there's been a lot of interchange with these words, and everybody uses them in different contexts. So again, I think there's a great need in order to define terminology, define caseness, and really get to standardizing our terminology and our case definitions. We have discipline silos. I mean, yes, we're a family, but we still stay within our silos. And again, I think that was evidenced by some of the presentations today. There's a clear lack of standard operating procedures for the field. Even though these standard operating procedures exist out there, and individually as our individual labs or collaboratives, we're using some standard operating procedures as a field, we haven't yet embraced any SOPs. And again, we haven't necessarily gotten together as a group to define common data elements, which will help us drive the standard operating procedures, as well as really taking significant steps forward. And I think a lot of this comes from a lack of coordination of our research, and in some instances, a lack of collaboration. There's huge gaps in study design. And, you know, without impeccable study design, we're going to take glacial steps forward. You know, it will be very hard to move forward. And I think these came up over and over again throughout the couple of days. We have study design issues when it comes to stratification. How do we stratify? We have subgroup and phenotype differences. We have differences on control groups and matching criteria, from basic demographics to whether or not the physical condition of our controls is the same. We barely touched on the need to include various types of disease control groups in our studies, which is very important, especially when we're dealing with something that is so complex and phenotypically so similar to so many other chronic diseases. Comorbid conditions, biomarkers, time course data. We heard we don't have any studies that really look at time course to really kind of capture the dynamics and some of the complexity of this disease. Clinical trials, we haven't even really begun to think of the type of study design required for CFS. Early detection studies are pretty much not out there. Pediatric versus CFS, or adult CFS. You know, is this the same, or is it a different animal, like Ben said? Outcome measures, we haven't agreed upon them yet, and various other types of standardizations that are really required to design the kind of studies that are needed to help us move forward. Types of studies. We talked about the need to have longitudinal studies. And again, natural history studies are so important to be able to understand what is it that people with CFS, how does CFS evolve over the course of time? Is there an increased rate of various types of cancers in people with CFS? Are there different types of comorbid conditions that people with CFS are more likely to be at higher risk for example, cardiovascular diseases, other preventable diseases, behavioral diseases that we can begin to intervene with along the way. Longitudinal studies will get us those kinds of answers. Genetic studies. We haven't even started them. We have the capability to do GWAS, but we don't necessarily have the well-characterized sample sets and the numbers that we need in order to be able to do them, as well as clinical trials. We talked a lot about the gaps in reproducibility, or the need, actually, for reproducible, replicable, and validated biomarkers. We have lots of promising biomarkers that come across in singleplex assays or multiplex assays and univariate analyses that look promising, but we need to be able to have those reproduced and replicated and ultimately validated so they can get from the bench to the bedside. there's a huge gap in animal models. And again, Keith Kelly brought this up, that this would be a great way to get at cause and effect. And from a practical point, we don't have enough doctors. It's a huge gap, handful of doctors and millions of patients. Somebody said that very nicely. And there's not enough researchers in this field. And I guess that all boils down to the fact that we just don't have enough money. But collaboration and communication, so we can leverage existing infrastructure, resources, and knowledge. We can do this. We might not have a bunch of money, but we have a history of funded research. We have an incredible amount of knowledge that we can leverage to make the difference. So this is where I see the opportunities really existing. And in many ways, XMRV has given us unprecedented attention, awareness, and opportunity that we have not had before. I think leadership, this really does need to be a leadership-driven field. Leadership needs to agree on and embrace the opportunities. How do we prioritize these opportunities that we have now? And we have many gaps to bridge. Each gap really does present as an opportunity. How do we prioritize them? I think